Lenses are exciting. Okay, I mean maybe not the Holt Slayer gate on nightmare mode exciting, but in our vast, wonderful, and not at all elitist community, they don't always get the recognition they deserve. People tend to go absolutely apeshit over the latest and greatest camera bodies, but sometimes neglect the beautiful piece of glass that's attached to said camera body. Last week, Lomography offered to let me test out their brand new upcoming lens, the Nour Triplet V, and all I could think of was,
I'm in the Nour.
No.
And after I got the silly goofy giggles out, I hit them with a hell yeah, brother. Listen, sometimes you gotta do that. The lens is available on Kickstarter today, but before you pony up your hard-earned shekels, you probably want to know more about what this lens is all about. Well, good news, you got me. To open up this Denny's mosh pit, let's quickly talk about what makes this lens so special, in my humble opinion anyway. Lomography is out here at it again, finding interesting ways to unify the digital and film experiences. This is a fully manual lens made for full-frame sensors. In a time where our digital cameras can basically focus themselves, Sony is rolling out AI to recompose images for you, and cameras are becoming so sharp that people are going out of their way to soften their images. This lens really felt refreshing to me. It made me feel more connected to my digital photography, as cringe as that sounds. Rather than blasting off hundreds of shots that I know will be in perfect focus, I really had to take my time to compose and focus my shots. The lens has a ton of character, with several focusing modes to give you control over your image. And what I find most interesting about the lens is it seems like it has a reasonably high skill ceiling. When I picked up my Viltrox 23mm for my Fuji, it felt like I knew everything I needed to know about the lens in like an hour. The Nour Triplet V isn't that. This isn't a lens that you're gonna pick up and master in a day. You have autofocus and shoot YouTube behind the scenes video. I shoot weird, out of focus, artsy shit. We are not the same. But before we get too into things, my precious little eggies, this is not a sponsored video. Lomography isn't telling me what to say. This is just a summary of my experience using the lens they let me borrow. I am absolutely thrilled with some of the results from the Nour Triplet V. This is a 64mm f2.0 full-frame lens. Lomography is making it for Canon RF, Sony E, and Nikon F. No love for Fuji, which kinda makes me want to crank free throw and cry while drinking a shower beer, but that's totally fine. I'm not taking it personally or anything like that. Here's some context surrounding my time with the lens. I only had it for a week. I was using the Sony E mount version, and I picked it up on a shitty rainy Tuesday for my friend at Lomography, Birgit. Hi Birgit, hi, how's it going? After that, I met up with my other friend Kristen, who is amazing and incredibly cool about this wacky last-minute shoot in the shitty weather, so big shout out to Kristen, the real MVP here. I shot a bunch of portraits of Kristen on my Sony a6400, and I'm not gonna lie to you here, I wasn't feeling incredibly confident at that point. I feel like I was low-key struggling to focus my shots, and listen, I am a man who is fully comfortable admitting when he scuffs focus, and I do it all the time, but this wasn't the normal case of one or two whoopsies on a roll, you know? I have become so used to my Fujifilm X-T4, I am super reliant on it, and this shoot made me realize that. If you've been following the channel for a while, you also know that I am not particularly fond of the Sony a6400.
Thing sucks!
I managed, and I got some shots that I really love, but after trying this lens out on my friend Nitara's Sony a7 Mark III, wow, there is a world of difference between those two cameras. I felt so much more confident with the bigger and better electronic viewfinder, and I certainly had a higher rate of in-focus shots with the Sony a7 Mark III. I think that bears mentioning though, having an adequate screen or electronic viewfinder on your camera is going to play a role given that the lens is fully manual. I personally prefer using the viewfinder over the screen, and my a6400's electronic viewfinder just ended up being a huge disadvantage. But hey, real men play Doom Eternal on nightmare mode, so you know I'm always up for a challenge. The Nour Triplet V really shines at night. I shot some portraits by the Pepsi sign in Long Island City, and the bokeh went absolutely bonkers. To quote my friend Cory, it was a movie. After spending some time with the lens, you really start to get a feel for it. The focus and aperture rings are incredibly smooth and they feel great. And keep in mind, this is the final prototype of the lens. And speaking of those fun, delicious, beautiful little rings, I don't know what was happening there. It's the perfect time to talk about the focusing modes on this lens. But you need to know a little bit of history. Lomography drew inspiration from a scientist,
Hassan ibn al-Haytham, who lived in Cairo circa 1021.
He was the first to note the existence of spherical aberrations, which is the basis of this lens.
What the hell is even that?
Spherical aberrations occur when light rays passing through a spherical lens fail to come together at a single point. With this in mind, the lens is a control knob that affects the look of your bokeh by using 3 levels of spherical aberration control. There are 3 focusing modes, all of which are incredibly unique. First up, you have the soft focus mode. This gives you a dreamy, soft focus, almost as if you have a really really heavy diffusion filter on the lens. You have a classic mode, which is your normal situation. In my experience, this is the sharpest setting on the lens if sharpness is your thing. And last but certainly not least, you have the bubble focusing mode. This gives you a similar sharpness to the classic mode with the addition of soap bubble bokeh that you find on some vintage lenses. You can switch between the 3 focus modes with the control knob here, which sort of snaps into place. Much like when I play Tears of the Kingdom, shifting between focusing modes results in loss of focus. One second I'm looking for Zelda, the next I'm building a contraption to airlift a stall horse out of the depths. Didn't work, by the way, spoiler alert.
What?
Oh, sorry, the lens. The lens loses focus because of the magical glass elements that are moving around when you shift focus modes or whatever. Look, I don't really know what they're doing in there.
I never know what she's doing.
But they drastically change the look of your work, and that's what we really care about. There's also drop-in effects filters, which I know won't be everyone's cup of tea. It's not exactly my cup of tea. They're cute though. You'll see them most prominently in light sources in your background. Here's a quick rundown of how they look. Based on my testing, it looks like you lose a stop or two of light when you drop these suckers in. To set them up, you unscrew this little piece on the back of the lens, slip in the filter, make sure it's lined up with the little notch thing, and then screw this piece back on. It's definitely a little fiddly. I was not a huge fan of doing this outside at night in Long Island City. That was not the most fun I've ever had.
It'd be like a beauty influencer.
Oh,
with
yeah.
the hand. Yeah, there we go.
But it's designed this way to keep the lens smaller. Overall, the fiddliness doesn't really bother me that much though, because if I'm being super honest here, it's not something I'd really use that much. This is extremely obvious, but once you drop that filter into the lens, you are married to that look, which sometimes can be a bit of a bummer because I love this shot, but I find the background bokeh to be so distracting. There are so many variables on this lens, and while I truly had a blast using it, I really would have liked if this lens had some sort of electronics in it just to transmit EXIF data. It would be so cool to know after the fact what focus mode you were using and the precise aperture value, blah blah, all that fun stuff. That way, if you inexplicably take a photo you're in love with, you can look into exactly what you did right. Maybe for the next one. When I think of lomography, I think of film and photography, but this lens is a beast for video. You have a really long and smooth...
That's what she said.
It's a focus throw. The focus throw on the ring is really smooth. It has a declicked aperture, so you can do very subtle changes mid-shot. The only thing that mildly drove me to the brink of sanity is the positioning of the focus and aperture rings. I am so used to having the aperture ring closer to the camera body and the focus ring up front, but this lens has those two reversed. Focus is closer to the camera body, aperture is up front. Probably takes a minute to get used to, and since I only had the lens for a week, I didn't. But man, this lens has character. I'm really bummed that I didn't get a chance to work on a bigger project with this lens, like a music video or a short film. I definitely need to do that in the future. Elephant in the room time. Let's talk cost. This lens comes in black aluminum and brass. You're gonna pay more for the brass, which honestly, miss me with that. I kind of like the lower profile black anyway, but whatever, you're paying for it if you want the brass. And you're gonna pay less if you back the Kickstarter. I can't really answer the question for you in your life if it's worth it or not, but personally, I don't hate the price. I think it's pretty fair. It is a very unique lens, but you really need to understand what it is and where it excels. Which leads me to the bigger picture. Who is this for, and do I recommend it? This lens is undoubtedly for the artsy-fartsy experimental photographer or videographer. Someone who's looking for a practical lens with autofocus probably isn't gonna love this lens or reach for it first should it find their way into their camera bag. This lens excels at methodical, slow-paced shots. It excels at helping you create interesting scenes, interesting textures, provided you have the patience and learn the lens itself. Would I be breaking this lens out for a shoot on a time crunch? Recently, I did an editorial shoot with my friend Mark. We basically had an hour to do 2 looks in a studio. I needed those shots and I needed them to be perfect. In that scenario, would I have been going for this lens?
No.
But creating some funky stuff with friends, shooting for fun, filming a unique music video or short film, you better believe it. There's no autofocus. There's no electronic connection. It's completely manual. It's not practical. And that's kind of what makes it amazing. If what I'm saying sounds at all cool to you, you'll probably dig this lens. Enough said. Let me know if you end up trying one out. Would love to see what you make. Big shout out to Lomography and Birgit for hooking me up with the lens. I was pretty bummed sending this one back, I'm not gonna lie. Mega shout out to Kristen, Nitara, and Cory for helping me test this lens on such a tight turnaround, and a massive thanks to Nicole for helping me shoot some last minute B-roll before returning the lens. Thanks for watching, my precious little eggies. Catch you in the next one. Bye.
Like and subscribe. Sweet Loop Photography. Domain.
I hit them with a hell yeah. Ooh, I'm going through puberty. Hell yeah, brother. An incredible amount of control of the user. Shut up, bird. It's definitely a little fiddly. I did this out in Long Island City at night, and I'm not gonna...